For more on this conversation, we're now joined by researcher at Gun Free South Africa, Claire Taylor, and she joins us via our video link. Claire, thank you so much for joining us this evening here in SABC News. 400 government-issued firearms here being lost or stolen. How worried should we be as South Africans?
Extremely worried, Mbali. It highlights the extent to which the state is contributing to the gun violence epidemic in South Africa. Currently, 31 people are shot and killed every day in this country. The latest crime statistics show that has in fact increased in the last quarter to 34 people shot and killed a day. And the state is answerable. As you say, over 400 guns have been stolen or lost by 3 state departments and have fallen into criminal hands. And what's more worrying is the low conviction rate. These aren't property-related crimes when guns and ammunition are stolen. These guns are contributing to the high levels of gun violence in this country, and the criminals need to be held accountable. To also say that we have to have a holistic approach, though, and recognize that the biggest source of illegal guns in this country are legally held guns that are held either by the state as well as citizens.
And Claire, one would ask, what does this say about government? These are 3 government departments, of course, accounting for more than 400 lost or stolen firearms. Clearly something needs to be done about this.
To also note, Mbali, that it's likely that these figures are an underestimate. So we know that weapons and ammunition management by the state is poor. And that includes firearms and ammunition held by citizens. So to just put this in perspective, is that in the last 4 financial years for which I have data available from SAP's annual reports, citizens reported the loss or theft of over 25,000 guns in that 4-year period. So we need to look holistically, and we need to recognize that while most gun crime in South Africa is committed with illegally held guns, the biggest source of illegally held guns in this country are licensed guns that are owned by the state and by citizens. And so we need 2 urgent interventions to address this. The first is interventions to recover and destroy illegally held guns. These are guns that have already leaked out of the legal pool into criminal hands. At the same time, we have to tighten controls over legal weapon stocks. And we see in the parliamentary replies that each of those 3 departments highlight interventions that they've put in place to stop the leakage of guns. But a key component of that is ensuring that we have a functional central firearms registry. At the moment, we don't. And we have to be able to monitor every single firearm from cradle to grave in this country, and doing that requires an effective record-keeping system. And Gun Free South Africa is deeply concerned that there's going to be a repeat of a tender that was awarded some time ago to a company that was paid over 350 million rand that was then deemed to be wasteful expenditure. A new contract has just been awarded to another service provider, and the state's being very quiet about giving information in terms of what the requirements of the service provider are. And we urge for more transparency, both in terms of weapons that are being lost and stolen, interventions that are being put in place to recover them, convictions that are being put in place, as well as tenders to control firearms.
These weapons, which are doing the rounds in the whole of South Africa, one would ask, when you look at the recovery rate, these are state firearms here, which we are talking about. And of course, you also allude to the fact that there are even more firearms belonging to civilians. What's the recovery rate looking like in terms of actually finding these firearms and destroying them?
So there are interventions at the moment to recover firearms, and so recovery rates have increased. We know, though, that, for example, police issue firearms. So these aren't firearms that are in the SAP's 13 evidence stores, but police issue firearms are highly, highly sought after. And so the recovery rate of those firearms is much lower than the recovery rate for, say, civilian-owned firearms. But we need concerted efforts, and there need to be intelligence-led interventions to recover illegal firearms. What we need to keep in mind as well is that firearms don't have a sell-by date. Once a gun has been stolen and fallen into criminal hands, it can be used repeatedly. For example, one of the guns that was stolen by corrupt police official Chris Prinsloo has been found to have been used in the murder of 17 people. So it's really, really important that there's focus on recovering these illegal guns and destroying them. But we also need to tighten controls over licensed weapon stocks. So, for example, doing audits is really important. And in fact, Gun Free South Africa has called it for the Auditor General to do those audits so that we can trust how many firearms are in state armories, are held by citizens. And we also need to tighten our Firearms Control Act. There are a number of loopholes in it that are allowing guns to leak into criminal hands. And so there's another intervention that's urgently needed.
And is there political will to try and, amend these laws to ensure that we do have, some sort of a control when it comes to firearms in the country?
In 2021, a draft amendment to the Firearms Control Act was published for comment. And so there is some indication that our government recognises the importance of tightening the Firearms Control Act to both align it with South Africa's international obligations, but also global norms. For example, globally, having a firearm for self-defense is not recognised as a valid reason, whereas in South Africa it is, although the evidence is overwhelming that having a gun for self-defense is not effective, that it actually makes people feel safer, but doesn't contribute to real safety. And the risk is that you choose to buy a gun thinking that you can defend yourself and your family, and in fact it gets lost or stolen, as 25,000 guns that are owned by civilians were in the past 4 years.
What should be the first step from government now that we find ourselves here and we see records of this nature and trying to prevent even further crimes from taking place? One would say that, it's quite clear that, what Dr. Groenewald says here, that government is becoming, somewhat the source for criminals to be using these firearms.
I think that there are three key interventions that are needed. The first is that those criminals who stole firearms and ammunition from state stores need to be held accountable. We have to stop the culture of impunity. But at the same time, we need specialized firearms units to go into communities and recover illegal guns and ensure that they are destroyed. And we need to tighten controls over licensed weapon stocks. For example, ensuring that we have an effective and functional central firearms registry, and ensuring that we have a good gun law that is properly implemented and that aligns South Africa with international obligations and global norms around firearms control.
Claire, thank you so much for your time here in SABC News. That is Claire Taylor. She is a researcher from Gun Free South Africa, just giving us her insights to that alarming rate. More than 400 government-issued firearms, of course, being lost or stolen.